We have another union situation. This time it is in New York City. There are 8 hospitals involved. Now there's kind of like 7 because there's a deal going on. I think it's a crappy deal. I have a friend here, Nurse Adrian, who knows all the things about unions. So she's going to help me. She can tell us if it's actually a crappy deal, but it seems like it's a Band-Aid on a gigantic geyser of a wound. We're going to go over what the nurses would like in this contract. If you out there are watching this and you are part of this current situation, by all means, let us know in the comments or during the live stream. Let us know and give us all of your insights. Or as always, if you have any details and you're very clumsy and you happen to trip and fall and those details fall into my inbox, I will leave my email below and do what you will with that. You will be anonymous. So there we go. Let us dive into it. Adrian, would you like to introduce yourself really quick in case people have not had the pleasure of meeting
Sure.
you?
I've been on a little bit of a hiatus, being sick, so now I feel like I'm pretty much recovered. I worked for a union for several years. I was most recently director of education, health, and safety for a very large nurses union in California, and worked for SEIU. At bookends around a nursing career. I became a nurse in 2007 and did bedside for over 12 years. And now I have my own business as a private patient advocate. And on the side, my hobby is doing policy research because I just can't get enough. I love it.
She's the one that knows everything in all of our live streams. She's like, oh, yes, and this. Oh, I know every state. And we're like, oh, perfect.
And I'm a regulatory expert in health and safety laws for hospitals, healthcare environments. So
It
it
is
helps.
wonderful. It is wonderful, and we appreciate you. Also, everyone, hello, Happy New Year. This is our first stream, and I feel like in a good bit because weather and holidays and all the things. I hope you're having a lovely start to your new year. Don't go too hardcore on anything, okay? This is when I saw all the people coming in like the end of January when I worked in primary care. And they're like, I've broken everything. I'm like, yes, well, well, we went from couch to marathon very quickly, very, very quickly. Salty C, thanks for becoming a member. I appreciate you supporting the channel. You're the mom. And all the usuals. Nurse Scott, Mama Nurse, hello. Amelia C, Kismet, hello all. Okay, let us dive in and see what is happening. Do we know about this strike in general? Let me know. I'm glad that I'm not glad. No one likes a strike, right? But the last time I was going to cover a strike, it got deleted. Like they rescinded it the day I was going to cover it. And I was like, well, so New York was kind enough to hold out for me. So we have here, Zoom. Okay. 16,000 nurses. We're going to subtract some of that numbers because this is from a press release when they first came out with the information on December 31st of 2022. The New York Presbyterian Hospital has now a tentative agreement, which we will cover later. So just keep that in mind with some of these numbers. They're a little bit outdated, but they couldn't tell the future. It's fine. The situation, approximately 16,000 NYSNA, which is New York State Nurses Association. Is that right, Adrian? Something like that?
Yes. Yeah, we call them
their union.
NYSNA.
NYSNA. Ooh, what a fun name. NYSNA. That's what we will call them. NYSNA. That's the nursing union that is involved with these hospitals. It has 8 hospitals, including New York Presbyterian. They're the ones that bailed and took the deal that we'll talk about. Montefiore, which is a very fun name. Mount Sinai Hospital, Mount Sinai Morningside, West and Maimonides. I probably butchered that. Bronx Care, Richmond University Medical Center, and Flushing Hospital Medical Center. They're all planning to strike. So they have all agreed that they had a contract that was coming up so in unions, you kind of agree to like, hey, these are the conditions we're going to work with. These are the raises we're going to get. These are you negotiate. You have people that you vote, very mini union lesson. You as a group of people say, hey, I would like people to represent us to go fight against hospital administration. You vote for people who then go and fight for you. And then you can come back and you have to agree to the plan that they make. That is what has happened here. And they come up with a contract. Their contract expired at the very end of 2022. So like December 31st, and they could not agree. So the meetings of all these people came together and they were fighting. And here's what we have. We're going to go over what they were fighting about, but basically they could not come to an agreement, which is when the union pulls out their giant, the biggest weapon they have, which is to say, hey, we're going to strike, which means our nurses won't be going to work. You're going to have to figure that out. Immensely expensive for the hospitals, immensely bad looking because they don't have people to cover. It's unsafe. Patients are usually like, why is this happening? But it came to that, and no one likes it to come to a strike, right? We're going to be talking in a minute too about like the media publication and all the things related to this, because they're blasting it as, how dare nurses try to do this in the middle of a tripledemic and blah, blah, blah. It's for patient safety. Ultimately, that's what we're getting to. And that's why the nurses are doing it. Nurses don't want to strike, right? This is like hey, you will not listen to what we need. So this is like the weapon that we have. So that's where we are. They have to give them 10 days notice, which they did at the beginning of the year. So December 31st, they give them 10 days to say, hey, get people in here. We need to staff it. Or you can come to us with a better deal in the meantime, and we will rescind that strike. The 10-day notice means that approximately 16,000 nurses and counting will go on strike beginning January 9th at least the 8 hospitals. So now it's 7, unless they can reach a fair contract agreement between now and then. They will continue, like it says, NISNA nurses will continue to bargain nonstop between now and January 9th in hopes of meeting these agreements. So why are the nurses, actually, let's back up. Adrienne, is that a good summary?
I think it situation is. Absolutely. I mean, it's really a lot to unpack. And, typically unions are not publishing their, what their demands are. This bargaining has been pretty tight-lipped as far as I can tell, as far as, sometimes it's kind of more clear, transparent what the demands may be. There's also been a big political change in landscape, right? There's a new mayor in town who certainly has had labor's backing in the, throughout his other offices he's held, and he had support of EMS workers. However, keep in mind, Eric Adams, announced in December this new rule where like now EMS can bring people involuntarily to psychiatric patients into the ER, which I'm sure is just thrilling to hear for every ER nurse in New York City.
So on top of a system that's already like, whoa.
Right. That's a little caveat on this too. So I'm really curious. My insider mind is really dying to know what the relationship is in those conversations that are happening in City Hall as well as in Albany at the governor's office, because there's got to be some chatter, and this has certainly raised the tensions for nurses.
For sure. And they've been very tight-lipped about it so far, at least I was looking to see if did the governor, did the mayor, did they make any public statement? And it looked like they really haven't. Really, the only people who have are like the hospitals saying, we're trying, but also we have a backup plan. You will still get care, doing all of their we're going to bring in nurses, blah, blah, blah. But there hasn't been any other real statements other than that, unless I've missed them.
And I would say, and I can't remember the last time there was a really big strike in New York City, but again, New York is a union town, and so there's a lot of implications to a strike. There are a majority of hotels are unionized. Workers are unionized. That will be there's components of bringing in massive amounts of travelers that may be a big lift, because there's going to be some resistance, I would assume, from union members in other industries that would have to support travelers coming into town to cross picket lines. Mm-hmm. We're talking trash not getting picked up. We're talking deliveries not being made. We're talking hotel workers saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to clean these rooms of these scabs, right? Mm-hmm. There's hospitality workers. There's a lot going on. So you're not going to expect the Starbucks workers to be serving coffee to strike breakers,
Because yeah. And just to clarify that, in a lot of situations, if you are also in a union, even if it's not the same union, they kind of stick together in solidarity. So they say hey, we're not we're not in a nursing union, but we are in a union. So we are not going to, the trash trucks will literally pull up to the hospital, but not go over it. Things you won't serve, serving different people. It's just it's a very big trickle down effect. No one wants a strike.
And now the other additional component we talked about prior to this is that NISNA now has joined National Nurses United, right, which is the largest RN union in the United States, in October. They are now part of the AFL-CIO, which they were not part of before, which in and of itself isn't such a big deal. SEIU, the union I worked for, left the AFL, then NNU came in. But what that means is that every other union that is part of the AFL is going to honor that strike line. They're going to have an agreement about that. There'll be, a decision made from the top saying, we'd like all these unions to respect the strike line. In addition, any that aren't part of the AFL that might be part of what's called a Central Labor Council, or these geographic labor groups, they're going to also pass some resolutions saying we're going to support this strike and not cross this picket line, ask our members not to. So we're talking, again, Teamsters, we're talking, hotel employee, restaurant employee union, HERE, Starbucks, everybody you could think of.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people.
So they just got a lot. So they just got a lot of leverage for this strike in the last just 2 months ago, which, is really a bold move, and it really changes. I'm sure it just changed the whole game plan, the whole strategy for them.
It puts a lot of pressure on the hospital, definitely, to do something about it. There have been other strikes too, or calls to strike, like you said, and this is something that has historically been squashed, where people will say oh, we're going to strike, and then they at the last minute will take a deal. There are murmurings of people getting, and who knows if this is actual, I'm not in those rooms, but a lot of people just from browsing the internet seem to feel like there's a lot of money that tends to exchange in order to accept deals that are maybe not the best. Who knows? We'll kind of look at that when we talk about the Presbyterian deal, and we'll get Adrian's insight on what she thinks about that. But here's what they are striking for, right? Because like I said, a lot of the public, you're seeing a lot of headlines that are kind of looking like this, where they really are highlighting oh, New York is going to strike as possible, as experts are saying, oh, there's a tripledemic. And if you watch this video, they go through and they show you oh my gosh, look, all these people are already in the hospital, and now you're going to take away the nurses in this already stressful environment. Aren't this is greedy, this is selfish, nurses just want more money, really, with everything else going on. And the thing to really realize is nurses are doing this because there are not safe situations within the hospital, right? There are not enough nurses to take care of the patients, which some videos have highlighted, but they're much more quick to usually highlight that nurses are greedy and just want more money. And while wanting money is part of it, because, inflation is happening and you deserve to make a living wage at these hospitals, especially when we compare it to what CEOs are making, which we will. I have a fun chart. You want safe ratios. So when you go into the hospital, usually depending on the unit you're on, there is a certain number of patients per nurse. That is not regulated in the state of New York. It's only regulated in California, which tries to follow it. They tried to, Adrian was telling us, and can touch on it in a minute too, they had tried to put that in place before for New York City to have patient ratios. It didn't end up going through. But this makes it very unsafe if you are in an ER or an ICU, and you're only supposed to have two patients, one or two. And all of a sudden you have 4 who are all ventilated, and you're doing all the drips to keep them literally alive. If you have 10 people on med surge, I had max 5, and I thought I was just going to run away screaming, because if you have 5 people who are all really sick, imagine having 10. That is what is causing these unsafe situations. And the hospitals just keep pumping, they just keep doing it. And the nurses are striking, saying, hey, we would like ratios that are set and that are safer so that we can actually do our jobs. Because I can promise you, you aren't doing your job if you're so stretched thin, right? And so, yes, it's there's never going to be a good time, right? Right now, there are these viral illnesses going around, but also right now, it's very unsafe to go into a lot of these places because the ratios are terrible. So it's not because nurses just don't care that we're in the middle of this crisis. This is a crisis, and the hospitals don't care. So they're trying to say, please, let us do our job in order to do things that would actually let us take care of patients. They're also asking for other things hey, we would like to be fairly compensated. We would they've asked for different things within their contracts, for health insurance, things. Some of them are still on a pension, some of, preserving those. But the bottom line, the biggest thing that most of the nurses want in these contracts is safe staffing, because they're losing their minds trying to stay afloat. in these situations. Amelia C says, it makes me sad that these important jobs are so underappreciated. This is my second degree. I already jumped shipped from my grad program as a physics teacher career because education is becoming a dumpster fire too. I was just going to say education and nursing, I feel like, and social work are all of those types of professions are just very underfunded. Yikes. Nurse Scott brings up someone had asked what the ratio should be. ICU, 1-on-1 or 1-on-2, depending on how sick the person is good. Med surge, 1-5. I would say depending on your med surge, if you work at a huge university hospital and you have 5 people, 5 is a lot if you're giving blood and chemo and someone else is on an insulin drip and everyone's confused. That was my floor, and 5 was not safe. And we never had techs too. So it depends. But ER, like 1-4. OB, usually it's like OB if you have someone in active labor, it's like 1-on-1. He gives a good website here if you're watching the live chat, National Nurses United, of what the law actually requires. But that is what nurses are asking for here, right? And they're making a stand about it because it's insane. You can't do your job in a situation like that. Salty C said, I've had 1-7 or 1-11. So that's 1 nurse to 7 to 11 patients in the ER with ICU mixed in here lately, which is impossible.
That's completely dangerous.
Yeah, like impossible. Right?
Also, I wanted to add, I found a study. University of Pennsylvania did a study in 2020. It came out. So this was data prior to the pandemic of New York ratios. And I don't know if it's a state or the city. I think it's a state. So what they came up with was that the average ratios were 1.8 in ICU to 4.3. That was the range, with the average being 2.5. Right. So pre-pandemic, and again, New York used to lead the way in wages. They don't anymore. They're far behind. Also, states like California. So, again, people assume, there's already 1-2 ratios, and there must be in New York. It's not. New York State and the city has fallen very far behind of where they should be for the population. Another little tidbit that's interesting is that because part of what the state is balked at about ratios, and even though there is some legislation that already was signed into law that has not been enforced, is that, we don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough nurses. When in fact, New York State has the highest per capita number of nurses per capita of any state, more than California. It's 18.7 RNs per 1,000 people. So there are a lot of RNs in addition to LPNs, which I don't know what that number is, in New York. So this isn't bearing out this, these panicked, defensive mechanisms of legislators and regulatory agencies. It's just not reality. There are enough nurses.
Yep. But they are not working. Like, I left the bedside because I was like, there are many reasons, but one of them being this does not feel long-term doable, because every day I leave and I just like collapse in a heap and I'm like, I survived, which should not be the general vibe of your day, because you're running through the list of how many things did I miss because I had too many patients, because I barely could keep my head above water. Am I going to lose my nursing license, which I paid $50,000 to acquire, which I'm still have to pay off? That is why, like, not only do you not want to harm people, obviously no one goes to work not to harm people, but you don't want to lose your nursing license, because do you think these hospitals are going to back you up when all of a sudden you're like, hey, why didn't you see that on your patient? You're like, well, I don't know. I had 12 of them, so I didn't get to go in there and check that. And when I came in, they were no longer alive. Do you think the hospital is going to be like, oh, well, that's right. We did kind of squash you there with your nursing ratios. No, they're going to be like, well, that was dumb. Good luck with that for the rest of your life. Enjoy that lawsuit. They're not going to protect you. And unions can be very helpful in situations like this in all the states except for California, who has laws mandating ratios, which is a good thing to advocate for. If you feel like writing a nice letter to your state's representative saying, we would like this, would be unions can come in and say, here is the nursing ratio at your hospital. I worked at a union hospital when I was working bedside, and they did. That was the biggest thing we negotiated for every single time. They always tried to up it. That, like, they would always try to throw more money at you. They were like, well, you can get this raise. And our union was very good. And they were pretty much held that line of no. This is our biggest thing that we want out of this contract every single time is we want to keep our patient ratios because our state does not mandate them. And the other hospitals in the area were insane. But we had ratios, and even ours, I mean, ours weren't like glorious, but they did hold to them, and they kind of have to. So that's what nurses would like here, is just a safe number of patients so they can go in and actually do their job and not accidentally harm people and not lose their license. We already have. They know we're here.
And
They know we're here, Adrian. It says, find the hot girls here.
All right, good.
The bots.
Oh, good. The bots are
You
here.
found us.
The other thing too is that some people are saying, well, they didn't get ratios in this contract. Well, it's important to understand, and I didn't know this until I did some research for tonight, is that in 2021, Governor Cuomo signed a law that says that basically mandated blanket ICU ratios to go into effect January of 2022, which did not go into effect, were not enforced. And also the other language for the rest of the units was that hospitals would work on staffing ratios, and they kind of mirrored the regulations of Title 22 in California, basically saying there has to be these staffing committees of 50% nurses and 50% administration to meet annually to discuss staffing. That's taken straight out of California law, and that law is not very well enforced, I can tell you. And that's why the ratios are really important, because even though the ratios in California also call for acuity based, which is what that yearly meeting is supposed to be, is to look at acuity and ratios. So again, there already is a law in effect for ICU in the state of New York that for a year now is not being followed.
Solid.
And we talked about Eric Adams, the mayor. So NNU did not endorse him. He was number 2 on their ranking list. They had endorsed Maya Wiley. So again, I think, the mayor's in a really tight spot here politically. And I see the only way you're going to win is he's got to come out and support the nurses, because you support the nurses, you're supporting the public, you're supporting patients, but there's a lot of money, in mayoral races, and anybody who's mayor of New York has their sights on a higher office. But, he did have a lot of labor backing. And he, came out of NYPD. He's had other offices, but I think this is really, I think that they're going to settle. I think there will be a settlement before a strike. However, I'll be curious to see if they get a better deal than already has been made at Presbyterian, because typically that's going to set the bar. The other hospitals are going to say, well, you guys took that, and again, for those that don't know, union members can negotiate ratios in their contracts also. And that has happened also in some contracts. So then it's enforceable through the NLRB. It's not enforceable through the health department per se, but it does become you cannot be terminated. You have cause for, arbitration or to get your job back if you're fired, if you refuse an assignment. Based on ratios. So it's actually, even in California, very important to get ratios in contracts. Even when you have ratios in law, it's important to actually mimic that. And often employers will say, well, we don't want to have the same thing in a contract. You're already covered by law by that. But in reality, there are additional protections, and that is arbitration. Now, if you get fired, just for example, if you get terminated and you're in a union position, arbitration is a process of basically the legal case to get your job back if you have cause based on your union contract. And arbitrations cost about $50,000 on average, and it can take a bit of time. So this is where the big, chunk of union dues can go to. And that's the most important benefit of being a union member.
And Anna, that's really helpful. Thank you. See, this is why we have Adrian. Also, make sure to go follow Adrian. She has all the social medias. She does this, but just all the time. So you can go follow her and gain her wisdom all the time. I promise you will learn a million billion things. And then she has some funny videos too, and they're the best. Good.
I'm getting back on the horse. I was on hiatus. I was on, illness hiatus, but now I'm back.
Yes, I think we've all been on illness hiatus, and then I just need a break hiatus. That was me. I was like, I'm just going to take 3 days off. 9 later, here we are. It's fine. Anna says unions do help, but they are not always the answer. Unions are only as good as their representatives. And that is very true. It is not, all unions are not created equal, my friends. And this is a good thing to kind of scope out. If I saw someone earlier saying that they were a nursing student and these conversations scare them, these are good things to scope out when you are looking for a job. Talk to the nurses on that unit. Do you like working here? If they have a union, do you feel like it does anything? Or are you paying money for people to just then make deals higher up the chain and you don't actually get anything from it? Do they enforce things? You know, that's the things that you're going to want to ask.
Absolutely. And I would say to everybody who says, not all unions are good or they're, have something negative. I'm not saying that there aren't bad things going on or there's not ineffectiveness at a certain point. It's an organization made up of members. But what I would ask people to think about, and I've yet to ever get an answer on this, is who's protecting you and who is going to enforce anything on your behalf if you are not part of a union. Who is going to stop your employer from rotating your shifts, changing your shifts, reducing your pay, reducing your hours, increasing your cost of your share benefits, removing your pension, whatever it might be, right? Not letting you have Christmas vacation, for 10, 20 years, which happened at my hospital before the nurses unionized. Nepotism, favoritism, all that. So again, it's not, nobody is saying, oh, this is 100% effective. No, it absolutely is not. But it is up to the members to take part in the unions. And I will say, like in NISNA, for example, there are 42,000 members. Now, this is very accurate. In the elections that they had for leadership of NISNA, only 4,000 people voted. So again, that's a choice that the 38,000 didn't participate. And so typically unions are going to be, I wouldn't even say led by 10% of their membership, but it's going to be a very small minority of people who are actually having input because those are the people who care to take the time to be involved.
Oh yeah. I was not involved in my union at all.
I mean, it's just, it is what it is. And it takes, and I'm not saying everybody has to be a steward. I'm just saying like be involved, get educated, read your contract. I can't tell you how many people, I just got a text message from somebody, a nurse at the hospital I represented that I worked at. I have not been there since 2020. And I haven't been employed by my union I worked for almost a year. And I worked with people who for 10 years had not read their contract. I'm like, could you read the contract? Okay. You didn't? Why not? Why is it not a priority? Read your contract, get a copy of your contract. You're entitled to it. There's so again, I see this over and over again, and I think the rhetoric just doesn't bear out. Because I can tell you the day after our pharmacists decided not to join the union, they were put on rotating shifts. Their pay was reduced 20%, and their hours were cut.
That sucks.
And they froze like 4 positions. So then it was basically 8 pharmacists or 10 pharmacists doing the job of 16. It was like ridiculous. The night shift pharmacist got no break. He had to cover 2 hospitals. And then they finally decided, oh, well, maybe, okay, we'll join, But we were like, you guys are going to get hammered if you don't do it now. And they sure did. That is money they will never make up. They will never get that money back.
Or sanity.
Right.
Yeah. Depending on which are all important. Here is, so when I was going through this, one of the things I was looking at was like, I was trying to put myself in the mind of, why would people resort to actually striking? Because I think that's a huge pain point of like, well, aren't there other ways that you can kind of like get this message across? So I did find this from the NISNA. This is just like their website, of why. This is an article saying like why they're striking. All of these I will link down in the description if you would like to peruse them. Just an overall vibe of they're not listening. Like this is not something that is new. These hospitals have heard this time and time and time again. Again, this is the kind of the tool of last resort. Like it says. When you have a union that has the ability to strike and the hospital like simply will not listen. I saw a lot of people in the comments saying, well, why wouldn't you use, if you have unsafe ratios, why would you accept the assignment and not use safe harbor? Safe harbor is not something that exists in all states. I think it's in Texas and maybe New Mexico, or it's something that you could say, this isn't safe. I don't feel comfortable. And you don't have to accept like the nursing assignment. That's not in all states. All states don't have that. Many have something sort of like it. Like this one has like patient care protests of assignment. This says NISNA nurses have received protests of assignment on a regular basis. They just don't do anything. They're understaffed. The hospitals refuse to adhere to a minimum nurse to patient ratio, resulting in preventable morbidity and mortality, which is preventable death and serious injury rates for patients. So that's things like, oh, your patient fell because you couldn't get there to go walk with them to the bathroom, something like that, which can lead to horrible things, but it could be, you know, something that could be as simple as a simple fall all the way to, you missed a critical lab value, or you made a mistake because you were rushing, or you literally, a patient had their call bell on because they were experiencing an emergency and you didn't have time to get there and then they died. All of which.
The other thing too on the strike issue, just to clarify. So when you have a union contract, you guys, you're going to have a no strike, no lockout clause for the duration of that contract. Typically, that's going to be part of the agreement, that you cannot strike while the contract isn't in force during the parameters, 3 years, whatever those exact dates are. Then the minute that contract expires, then you have the right to strike. So you may have the right to picket, you have the right to do other actions, but not strike as a concerted activity, because then that can be a National Labor Relations Act violation, and the union can get massively fined, or, you know, all kinds of stuff. So it's not like, you know, there's this option to strike every day.
Mm-hmm.
It happens during a period where the contract is expired. And again, remember, the hospitals, the employers, no matter what industry, can always settle a contract and initiate negotiations prior to that contract being open.
Mm-hmm. But they're usually difficult to get in contact with, in my experience. Right. They're not super open to chatting about this in August, you know.
Right. They don't want to. And unfortunately, I can tell you this is going to bite these hospitals, because now that NISNA has joined NNU and has that kind of leverage, that kind of power. I mean, they already were a massively powerful union. And I think, you know, for better or worse with this change, they are much stronger now and have a lot more leverage. And I'm just saying, in a city like New York, a small, compact, dense city, very unionized city, that is the last place, if I was, you know, a scab, if I was gonna, that is the last place I would want to go, because you're just going to be under a microscope in that city, crossing a picket line. I'm just saying, it's not like you're out in the boonies in Bakersfield, or, you know, out in the middle of nowhere, right? Or the rest of the state. You are going to be under that microscope in a very dense city. I do not even see the ability of the hospitals to get the nurses that they would need. If there's 12,000, if there's 12,000, what do we say? There's 8,000 nurses left, or 12,000 nurses left?
I think there's 12,000 is what they said.
Right. So they were going to need 15,000 travelers to cover that, because they always massively overstaff, right? They're going to need 7,000 hotel rooms minimally. We're talking, the Uber and Lyft is unionized. They're not going to drive these people. I mean, when I tell you that these would be persona non grata to the max in New York City. It's just, I don't see it happening. And I do hope that these nurses really leverage everything that they have and get everything that they deserve.
And realize that they have that backing behind them.
Absolutely.
You know, like recognize that. So if you're watching this, if you happen to be one of these people, you have a lot more power than they probably are telling you that you have.
Right.
Because
these hospitals, it's not like a typical strike where, like, your bus picks you up at the, you know, hotel, they drive you onto the property. There is no property to drive you onto in these hospitals. You know, I have friends who work at some of these hospitals that are not nurses. You know, they live across the street. They walk across the street. They go in the, you know, it's like, it's on the street. There's no parking lot. There's no property you drive into. You're right there. The entryway to the hospital is right there. So there is no way to do kind of the normal, I don't know, cover up kind of things that, you know, that these agencies will do and hospitals will do when they bring scabs in. So I know Bakersfield. I love Bakersfield. I'm just saying, like, that geography. No, I mean, hey, I worked in Oxnard, so Bakersfield by the sea. So, you know, it's, you know, I worked on a hospital. It was a square mile campus, you know, so they put a fence for a square mile around our hospital during a strike. or they attempted to, and then they apparently ran out of fencing or something, and then it was kind of funny and a joke.
Dang it.
It was kind of
giant hole.
That was dumb.
Good try.
Good try.
And if you're unfamiliar with the term scab, just in case you are not like in the healthcare realm, a scab is a nurse in this case who would come in and cover the assignment. So they would basically, you're acting as a scab, you're staunching the bleeding, you're being the travel nurse to come in and work instead of the nurses who normally work there during the strike. So that is a lot of people call them scabs.
I apologize if I offend anybody with that.
Some people find it to be an offensive term.
It just rolls off my tongue. Yeah. I worked in a union, you guys. Yeah. You're lucky I'm not cussing. I mean,
a lot of people, and there's kind of like two sides to that. Some people think it's just great money because usually you get a lot of money to come in and be a nurse that is going to be covering a strike. There's also a lot of frustration on the side of the other side of it is nurses saying like, you need to not come in and relieve these, like the hospital needs to be screwed. You basically like, don't come in and make it easy on them.
It's leverage to settle. And people get it caught up in that rhetoric of like, oh, the patients. Well, the reason the nurses are striking, part of it is for the patients.
It's for the patients.
The whole purpose of our job is to take care of patients, right? So the reason, if you improve working conditions, you improve pay, you improve ratios, treatment, benefits, everything, the environment of care, you're going to improve the care for the patients. That is just going to be a natural side effect of that. Having more staff is going to help patients. I mean, and these poor nurses, I mean, what New York City especially went through, in 2020, 2021, these, and not just nurses, I mean, everybody in healthcare, right? What they went through, I mean, I just, they deserve the best. They deserve the best. The patients, the public deserves the best. And keep in mind, you guys, when you get caught up in that rhetoric of, oh, well, what about the patients? Yeah, what about the patients? Point that attention to the CEOs, to the organizations, because they have the ability to settle. It's not like there's not the hospitals over there, the employers who are on the other side of the table, who are holding the purse, right? They have the ability to settle. They could settle right now. They could have settled yesterday. They could have settled 2 days ago. But
they're not there yet.
But they're going to drag out this show, this performance of bad mouthing the nurses. And let me tell you, that is going to also even when they settle, it's going to denigrate morale. It's going to make, these CEOs, these executives have mud on their face, and it's going to make it even worse for them to work with these nurses. It's going to make it even worse for them. And here's the other part. When you have a strike, so again, the other union that represents everybody else in these hospitals, including the PAs, the physician assistants, is 1199 New York, SEIU. So that union has over 225,000 members. So they have almost as many members that in this small geographic area that all of NNU has in the whole nation, right? And in those hospitals, they represent everybody else almost. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe not the engineers, maybe not security, I don't know, but pretty much everybody else. So in a strike situation, the National Labor Relations Act allows workers to not cross a picket line. So guess what? Do you think that some of these people are going to cross the picket line? If it's my mom and my sister or my spouse, my cousin, who's the nurse, and I'm the groundskeeper, I'm the CNA, I'm the phlebotomist, I'm the lab scientist, I'm in the kitchen, I'm not crossing the picket line. I'm not going to have a home to go to. No way. It's not going to happen. People will not cross that picket line in support. So it's not just the nurses that are going to be involved in this.
Yep. And I think that's a really important thing to highlight, because I think people, I did not realize that until you started talking about that. I was like, oh. Right.
And nurses, so again, to put it in perspective, so you've got 12,000 nurses. So I'm going to guess, I don't know how many beds total on these hospitals have, but you can basically double or triple that number of RNs. And that's how many other staff are in a hospital. Somewhere around that, depending on what services, again, if they have clinics involved that also are part of the hospital, all of it. So again, you're going to have a lot, you're going to have PAs not crossing the picket line.
Which is a problem. It just causes a huge ripple down effect. I put in as a pinned comment for the moment, if you guys want to chime in, would you like, what do you think about nurses who would come in and cross a picket line? Would you thoughts? I don't think there's like I said, like a right and wrong. I think more like I probably would not, but I also come from a privileged position of not being like in desperate need of getting a ton of money super quickly. Like, would it be great? Obviously, yes. But I am not in dire straits. If I was in like I needed money or I just wanted money, like it's a lot of money. And there you go. So I would view it more as like a financial thing. Like, do you need the money? Then hey, go for it, whatever. At the end of the day, nursing is a job, but I feel like morally, I'm unsure. Adrian, where do you fall?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's no way I would never. I will go dig food out of the trash bin behind Trader Joe's if I have to eat, than
Before.
cross a picket line. There's no way I will panhandle. It does. I will sell things. It doesn't matter, because that's my self-esteem and that's my
Mhm.
honor as a person. And I know what the cost is. So just for example, you guys, if you have, let's just say you have 1,500 nurses, a strike for about 1,500 nurses is going to cost somewhere around $10 million.
Which really just shows you how the hospital really thinks of people, because they know it's going to be so expensive and they like care so
Right.
little for like patients and nurses that they're like, yeah, it's fine. That's worth it.
And people say this thing about strike insurance. I have never heard of strike insurance nor had validation that it actually exists. I know nothing, and I have never had any hospital administration corroborate that there is strike insurance. I have never seen it in the financials of a hospital system, because part of bargaining, the hospitals have to hand you over all their financials of all their big ticket items. So as far as I know, strike insurance for hospitals and healthcare, it doesn't exist. That's a myth.
Hmm.
It
Yeah,
is
I've never
coming
heard that.
straight. It's coming straight out of the bottom line. And again, so we're talking like, $100 million here. And again, we're talking hotel rooms in New York.
Hmm. And
We're not talking hello, the hotel rooms in New York are like $400 a night, right? So, and we're talking all the food, the catering, the transportation. This is not the flying these nurses in. This is Oh, and by the way, there's, in case folks haven't watching the news, there's a total breakdown happening in the airline industry. So again, I just don't see this happening. I do not
mhm.
see this strike happening. The hospitals need to settle. They need to do the right thing. They need to put that money forward, because spending $100 million, upwards, at least $50 million for replacements. Again, I don't know if this is what's the duration of the strike, Liz? I didn't actually realize. I didn't know. Was it
I I don't know either.
Did they just if they put an
Interesting.
open-ended strike, forget it. There's no
It might
way.
have.
If it's a
No,
10
yeah, if
year.
anyone knows, let me know, because I wanted to say 10 days, but I think it was the
Yeah.
strike notice was in 10 days. I don't remember seeing. Oh, let me open. I have all of the contracts that they had.
So
Um, you guys are
Pirate of the
pretty
care,
split
right?
on
So
who would.
who's going to take care of
Mhm,
patients while they hash it out? Here's the thing: the hospitals have the ability to settle. The hospitals need to settle. It is their responsibility under the laws of each state, right? Their licensure says it is up to them to provide care for the patients, right? As part of that, they need to settle. They have the ability and the right to settle. So open-ended strike, forget it. It's not going to happen. It
mhm.
is not. I'm just telling. This is not Minnesota. This is not like any other Massachusetts. This is plus it's so union dense in the surrounding areas of like Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey. Well, I don't know about New Jersey, but there are some union hospitals there. It's not like people are like, oh yeah, let me go to New York and take public transportation 3 hours to get to New York City
Mhm.
to go work. This is not going to happen, and we should support these nurses 100%. The feasibility and expense of this will be absurd.
Yeah. And that's if like one thing that I mean we can start doing now even is just showing nurses that they do have the support of everyone else behind them, right? Because this has to feel very lonely and isolating to see that the entire work, like a lot of the news outlets and media are all saying like, how dare you, when this happened at the end of their contract. Like Adrian said, they are not like, oh, hey, it's cold and flu season, let's do this now. Their contract expired December 31st. This is when you strike, when you don't get a contract, because you don't strike during a contract, you strike when it's up because they're not meeting your new demands. So this was not like, hey, this seems like a fun time. It was like, this is when it's happening. Again, they could have, like the hospital could have met with them to negotiate forever ago. At least historically in my union, the hospital pushed it off until the very last minute. It sounds like it's a very universal experience. So it's not you being evil, but just think like as a nurse too, you would have to be feeling all of the pressure from people saying, how dare you? You're just greedy. When enough people say that, you're going to start thinking, am I just greedy? Am I making a big deal out of nothing? Am I being dramatic? The internet is also really mean, depending on where you are. And they're going to say the exact same things, like, just get over it, take the money, blah, 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 blah. Like, just do whatever. And it feels very crappy. I'm sure they feel like they're abandoning people too. And
I mean, nobody wants to go on strike. I mean,
no one
it's
wants
the
to go on
last,
strike.
nobody, I mean, unless you really, well, I have to say at my hospital, people did. They were really annoyed when we settled the contract. But, you know, it very rarely, but again, remember, this is 4 to 5 boroughs, every borough except Staten Island, right?
I think they even had one.
Did they have one too?
There's one, I think one hospital when I was trying to make a map and then it didn't work out. But
I'm terrible. All these things. I can't keep track of all the names of the hospitals in New York and who operates what. So remember, there's 5 boroughs in New York, right? And you've got, there's nowhere else. There's just nowhere they're going to get these nurses from for an open-ended strike. It will not happen. They cannot even begin to meet the needs of these hospitals, the staffing. And there's no way possible for these hospitals to divert those patients to other hospitals. These hospitals are already at capacity, you know, as things are ramping up. I mean, I don't know, RSV is, everybody's saying it's kind of over with or almost over with. But again, we know COVID numbers are ramping up. We know they're ramping up very hardcore in the Northeast. Just visits to the ER. You know, we've got this wonderful thing the mayor did of, you know, empowering EMS workers to bring anybody who they deem as mentally ill involuntarily to the ER. Where do those patients go? They're not even able to take care of them now. Right? That's part of the issue. So again, keep in mind, the patients are not being taken care of now. If you've got if you've got up to 4.3 patients in ICU per nurse, they're not being taken care of now. Right.
No,
so
which is why they're striking. Yeah.
Yeah.
And someone had said that something about the NICU. Poet's Hope said, babies in the NICU died during a strike. Each unit is different. Some units would be okay and some are not. And without sounding like horribly callous, they are dying because there are not enough nurses now.
They're dying now.
They're dying now.
Babies die now. Well, indeed.
Because there are not enough
patients
staff in a
now.
NICU. Exactly.
Right.
And that is why, we are already at that dire situation, which I don't know if the general public realizes, right? Until even I knew because I do this channel, but I didn't know it until I stayed with a friend in in a hospital. It is a hot mess. Put the call light on, no one shows up. Literally no one shows up for a very long time. We are in the dire situation now, which sounds, so it sounds very callous to say yes, doing this probably causes harm to patients, right? That is what happens during a strike. But so many more people are going to die. You have to kind of look at it as a risk assessment almost.
People die every day in hospitals. So to attribute a death to a strike, that's completely unfounded. I know for a fact it is. There's absolutely no proof or corroboration anybody's going to bring forward about that, because it's not ever going to be exactly proven. Medical examiner who's put on any report that somebody died as a result of unsafe staffing, even, or a result of a strike. It's patently not true. And again, it's up to the hospitals to operate their hospitals. So they're already failing. We already know healthcare is a problem. The other option is nurses are leaving. They're just leaving. They're not coming in. There's already, again, let's go back to the per capita, 18.7 RNs per 1,000 people in the state of New York, the highest rate of any state. So why are these hospitals not paying enough and doing what they need to do to bring nurses back into the hospitals? There's
And what
another
are they all saying? Yeah.
there's another component here of moral fatigue too, because you've got the nurses that are like kind of naive and like think the best of management. And then it comes down to these negotiations, and all of a sudden they're like, oh wow, you really are Satan. And so they can become very demoralized in this process. And it's very hard sometimes to get beyond that. And so even after a settlement, when they start to see really, what management's real colors are and how they're really behaving and what they really think of nurses, that in itself will drive people away from the bedside, which is, that's like a secondary fallout of this like smear campaign that the ministers, this is also union busting. Because keep in mind, you guys, these hospitals are all pooling their money. They're paying millions and millions of dollars right now for union busters. This is all money.
To go and say unions are evil,
right.
Blah, blah,
this
blah,
is our
blah.
tax dollars. This is a chunk of our tax dollars that goes to Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid, that gets funneled back and then pays for these executive pays and also union busting firms. Nothing to do with patient care.
A mess. And Montana Gal kind of drove this home point, going back to the like ratios in like a NICU. NICU is neonatal intensive care unit where the little babies are. Four NICU babies to a nurse. 4. I worked on a cardiac unit for babies, and they weren't all even ventilated or on critical care. And if I had 4, bad things were going to happen to some of them, like because tiny babies require a lot of attention. And 4 is not safe. So babies are going to die in this situation.
And we're seeing a trend in all hospitals right now, especially the chain that starts with H and ends with A, that they around the country, there's a total change happening in the OB, L&D, NICU units of doing this Rochambeau with staff. So you're using the charge nurse for NICU, who then has to go to the codes, the C-sections, and L&D to be the charge nurse and OB postpartum, be the break nurse, do a million roles at once and like triple count these people in the staffing ratios and short staff them. We're seeing the conflation of OBs and NICUs. I mean, an OB nurse postpartum has nothing to do with NICU. They're not they're again, one's ICU, one's not, and everybody has their own specialty. So we're seeing a real collapse in that OB world. And there's some really great, podcasters, YouTubers out there and that talk specifically about the OB situation, which, is, to me, is just the worst of the humanity of management and hospital executives.
Yep.
To hurt kids and put kids at risk. You guys have no idea, if you're not an OB, L&D, or don't know L&D nurses, the kind of things that go on and what they see. It's
very sad.
And there's a lot of preventable deaths. There's a lot, a ton. Lot. Like, it's disturbing. Like, that story has not ever really been written or put out publicly, unfortunately.
Because it gets covered up.
It does. It gets covered up. Yeah. It just 100% does. And the burnout rate, again, L&D nurses are critical care nurses. These are not dime a dozen nurses. These are highly specialized trained nurses. A pediatric ICU, very special, extremely specialized. So yeah, Mr. Midwife, it's infuriating, the things that happen and the lack of support for L&D, OB, NICU nurses who, I can handle where I worked in telemetry step down. It's normal. People get sick. They have chronic illness. They're going to die. They're at the end stage. I could deal with that. I could not emotionally deal with what I have seen people I know who've worked in those other areas at the beginning of life deal with, or the demise of a mother for no good reason.
Because they just won't listen. Yeah.
None of it's a priority, honestly. Yeah. It's just, it's about money. It's really about money and greed.
Which is what the hospital is saying it's not about. They're saying they don't have enough of, which is interesting. So someone had just said they're all just about money. True. Let me find I
didn't look up the pay scale for the executives.
I have it.
Oh, good.
I have it. But now I'm realizing it might cover up your face. So just please hold, because I was doing it in my head and I was the only one here, but that was dumb because I knew you were coming.
That's okay.
So Adrian is now an infographic. So this was posted from the NISNA website. Interesting. So they all say that they don't have enough money in order to give ratios, because ratios are always what nurses come back to. That's why all the nurses are leaving, because they're saying, I am not putting my license on the line for this. This is not worth it. I'm scared to go to work. This is a mess. Patients are dying. I don't want to do this. Right. That's why there's no real nursing shortage. We have a whole video about it. I think it was a panel discussion where we got to talk about it. There's no nursing shortage. There's just really crappy jobs that no one wants to take because they're not safe. And if you treated nurses and teachers and social workers better, then they would go back. Probably, right? If you let them pee and eat and gave them a normal amount of patients or students, they would go back. But no, we can't figure that out. We would rather pay ourselves. So here are the hospital executives who say, oh, we can't possibly do any of this. This is without bonuses, okay? Because they have gotten many, many bonuses on top of this. The New York Presbyterian, they're part of this strike. Their CEO made $12 million. Okay, that's without bonuses. This one is Montefiore. This one is part of it. Their CEO made $7.4 million. New York Presbyterian, the COO made $7.3 million. The Nuvance Health, I don't remember if they were part of it, but they make $7 million. Montefiore, the former officer of something, made $5.1 million. So it's interesting that then, and that's all without their bonuses. Remember, it's interesting that then they cannot reinvest even a tiny bit of that to help supplement their staff and find the nurses find the jobs to help make it so that it's actually safe, which is just
and these are not even counting that's just the top paid one person, right? So we look at you figure
there's a whole
the top
C-suite.
10, there's a whole C-suite, right? So there's probably upwards of $30-40 million wrapped up there. And then you're talking about forgivable loans for housing stipends, vehicle stipends, drivers, travel stipends, clothing stipend. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that and I didn't know all this until I went to work for a union and started to see these numbers and started to really understand, actually, that Porsche that the president's driving is leased by the company and he's not even paying taxes on it. Oh, and this person got a forgivable loan of $500,000 for their house that then is forgiven. So, and that's non-taxable, right? And, on and on and on. And then they get a severance. They get severance when they leave. These are annual salaries. Yes. These are annual salaries. These are hospitals, and I don't think all of them are for profit either, right? So the amount of money that goes up, and it's not to say that the entire contract will be covered by that amount, but it just shows, it's hard to rationalize, and this is again, nurses are not getting paid a living wage really in New York City. They're not getting paid California wages. They used to lead the way in wages. California caught up and then exceeded New York. So wages are not that great in New York City.
And I think when you look at the numbers, sometimes, especially when you don't live in New York or California, you look at what nurses there are making and you're like, dang, that's a lot. I need to remind you that you can live in literally a shoebox and it's like $4,000 a month. So it's just very different. Very, very
right.
different.
So these are people that get up at 4 a.m. They commute 2 hours on the train because they live way out somewhere. Staten Island used to be kind of affordable, but nobody wants to live in Staten Island. It's not again, you got to you have a long commute. You have a long time away from your family. And again, this is, and I don't know what the average wages are, but it is much lower than I thought it would be at this point. So I really do hope that they get what they deserve and more than what the Presbyterian nurses took. On paper, it looks good, but in reality, they need to have a cost of living, a whole adjustment up on the whole scale.
Yep, for sure. So that's the situation, friends. That's what, Broho says Presby friends commute from Jersey, which takes a long time to get to work. Yeah.
Right.
You should be paid for that. That's the situation in some. One of the hospitals. So at the beginning of the week, everyone was going to go on strike, right? All 8 hospital system, they were all going to go on strike. One of them has come to a tentative agreement. So like we have been saying, where you can come and the union bargaining people and the I don't know, management people of the hospital, they can still come to a deal, right? And one of the hospitals has sort of done that, but they did not solve literally the biggest problem. So that's New York Presbyterian. They have come together. Adrian, I'm so sorry. I'm just going to chop off your face again. They have come to a deal, right? And they have given them a few different things, which on the surface, it looks good, right? You're like, oh, like let's start out with the positive things. And this is not, the nurses have not accepted it yet. They are voting on it today, tomorrow, today through Friday. Friday, I think they're voting online. So if you are in this union and you work at New York Presbyterian, please just consider what Adrian has told you about the support that you do have, because you have not gotten the one thing that you actually need in order to keep your sanity and your license and your job safe. Okay, just like remember that. So they are offering them, so the nurses have to approve it. Basically, they have to all come together and say, hey, thanks for negotiating for us for this. This is not what we wanted. No, thank you. Hopefully they say that, not yes. At least that's my opinion. We'll hear Adrian's. What they are giving them is a wage increase. Again, these numbers look nice, right? They're going to, this is what happens in a contract like this. They go through and they say, you're going to get this much of a raise this year, this much of a raise this year, this much of a raise this year. So over the course of 3 years, it's 19.9% compounded. I think they were already going to give them 14 or 16 anyway. So it's like not huge from what they were going to get anyway. And remember, these numbers are for living in New York. So if you live in Pennsylvania like me, you might be looking at this like, wait, what? We don't live in New York City. Okay. It's very expensive to live there. They would give them retiree benefits. They were going to give them health insurance if they were on like a leave of absence, vacation buyback. They were going to give staffing. So they wanted better ratios, right? So there would be ratios in the contract. They instead gave them the line of, we will improve staffing by providing additional full-time positions that will be added over the next 3 years. And there will be a staffing grid improvement. They are also going to have an improved staffing enforcement mechanism. I will show you what that looks like in a minute. It's a hoax. Increased job security. We don't need job security. We're nurses. Stupid. You need me a lot more than we need you. Protection of benefits, protection of a pension. And this is where we start getting into waters of, I fear the people who might vote on union contracts, and this might be me being a conspiracy person. Like when I was a new nurse, I did not read my union contract because I was Adrian's worst nightmare. And I was like, I'm just going to go to work. I'm like, whatever, I'm sure it's going to be fine. That's for old people. Well, now I'm 30 something and I'm the old person who would be like, show me the contract. I didn't read my contract and I sure didn't vote on my union contract. So it's the people who are going to be more mature, who are going to read the union contract, who are closer to retirement, who are like, I can just stick this out for a few more years. I want my pension. I'm just going to agree to this, but that might be a conspiracy. They are adding the holiday Juneteenth. I'm pretty sure Juneteenth was already a holiday in New York. Like, I think that was something that was passed into law. I could be wrong. Improved leave for death, family, process, blah, blah, blah. Coachings will no longer be considered disciplinary, which is weird. Like when you're coached, why would that be disciplinary ever? Different things like you would be on there before you would have to, they would get rid of travel nurses before they would lose you. You get conference time, something about a parking garage, which I understand would be very important for people in New York. They're increasing the NISNA negotiation committee to 13 nurses, and maintenance of professional practice committee at all campuses. So what is missing from that is patient ratios. So they did not give them anything on that. They did give them, they said,
which would be considered non-economic. So for those of you who may be buying the line that they don't have the money, those are considered non-economic components of a contract. So they protected so there's good stuff. They protected their pension, very important.
Very good.
They paid holiday. It sounds like they added some protections for layoffs, which do happen, and restructuring, and their health insurance. I'm not sure what it was before, but again, when you guys see those numbers of the 112,000, 120,000, whatever, I came from California. I left in 2020 making $125,000 a year in Oxnard as a 12 years. So I was making 55, 60 an hour. I can't remember what my differentials. So again, that's New York City is expensive. So you're
more
the
expensive. Yeah.
right. And then think about childcare costs. You're gone for 15 hours a day, all that stuff. So
So that's what they offered them. And they were very proud of themselves. And I'm not saying it's all bad. Like Adrian said, there are good points to it. Protecting your pension is important. Keeping healthcare. Side note, I think they are telling them they no longer have healthcare if they strike. So they really are just kind in general and
that's
NIMBY.
regressive
So
bargaining. It's actually against the law. They cannot
oh, good.
take
Good. That's good to
technically
know.
that's considered regressive bargaining. Once you've agreed to something, you're not really going to be able to take it back. You can have charges filed against you.
Good. Well, that's good. That makes me feel a little better because I saw that and I was like, well, that's just pure evil.
So
this
just pure evil because it's not going to happen.
Yeah. You're like, yes. So this is from their Instagram post, right? And they were very proud of themselves. They were obviously, so it's the people bargaining. And this is where people were saying, I think the people who were bargaining, like on the union side, got paid off because they kind of forgot like the biggest thing. And they are encouraging people to sign this, right? They want the nurses that work at this hospital to sign this. The comments are not thrilled. NISNA does not have our backs. We got sold out. They kind of go on in a similar vein. Someone was like, where there's one where they were talking about what does the staffing thing actually do? And someone came on and they were like, well, the staffing thing means, and I might be able to find it in a minute, but I'll just summarize it because I'm not prepared. They were saying that within this new contract, now they would have like an intermediary group where if you were not safely staffed at the time, you could report it to a labor board type of thing. And that labor board could then decide, the union could come and say, like, here's the situation. And then the labor board would tell the hospital what it had to do to fix the problem. But that doesn't really help you like in the situation. And I can almost guarantee that the labor board would probably look at it and be like, well, like when possible, please staff it this way. But they're always probably going to include some kind of clause of like, ideally. But the benefit here is that the NISNA was trying to say was before the labor board thing could only like recommend, not enforce. But I very much, doubt. Like
so
these are like
labor management committees, basically committees that are built into contracts. So, and they by and large don't have much teeth. You have to be extremely diligent and you have to have arbitration connected to the resolution. You have to have expedited arbitration. Otherwise, there's no teeth, there's no enforcement. So the only other incentive is if you build into a contract that there's actually a penalty that they're going to pay, like you're going to pay $25 an hour anytime you go understaff XYZ, right? Which in SEIU, we had that in some of our contracts, believe it or not. And so what I'm missing here, so from a union perspective, a union insider perspective, what I'm not seeing here is I'm not seeing something that says, your bargaining team is encouraging you to vote yes.
Let me find it.
And
because they did.
Did they? So that I was looking for that. And I'm also looking at the length of time that they're allowing for the agreement to be voted on. So when you have this really lengthy period of time that you're allowing ratification to happen, that usually, here's my perception. I'm just going to throw this out here. I could be totally wrong. I'm guessing that the NISNA bargaining team, there probably was some differences of opinion on their bargaining team about what was going to be acceptable, what was going to get agreed upon, what was being offered. They said, hey, let's take this offer. Let's bring it to the members to vote on. But they're allowing this really long period for voting because they want to cover themselves as an organization and a team and say, hey, we want to make sure everybody who is eligible could vote yay or nay on this TA, on this tentative agreement. And so don't come back at us and say we didn't do what you guys wanted, right? And I would highly suggest that every one of these nurses vote no and reject this contract. I would definitely say reject this contract, send your bargaining team back to the table, put them back in the pit with the rest of these hospitals, right? Get this is more or less a master agreement because you've got everything lined up. Because now what's going to happen is if you agree on this contract, right? Here's the other part. You have all these contracts expired at the same time. There's like what we call master agreements or kind of like even if they're not connected, you line up all the contracts so you have more leverage, because then you can all go on strike, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to be the first thing that's going to happen when they go back to the table is the rest of these hospitals are going to say, guess what? We want a 4-year contract. We want a 5-year contract, because the last thing these employers want is to have all these contracts expiring again at the same time, first off. So they're going to try and throw carrots out there to the nurses at the other contracts for something a little bit better, but you agree to a 4-year contract or a 5-year agreement. Right. So that's one thing that I can guarantee you is happening at the table, or going to happen at the table. I can also tell you that they're going to have a very hard time improving on what Presbyterian, the bargaining team, agreed to there. Right. Is it's just, once you settle, the rest of the hospitals are going to say, well, this is what they're agreeing to. So you've got 5 days. So let's put it this way. They're supposed to go on strike on the 9th. Right. So today is the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. They're voting until the 6th. So this is very interesting. So they're not going to even know whether this contract gets ratified until Friday, 3 days before the strike is supposed to start on the 9th. So again, very interesting, the timing of all this and how they are allowing this really protracted bargaining, or this protracted voting time to go on, versus having like a 2-day expedited voting. And also the fact that they're allowing online voting, usually that's more or less unheard of. I mean, again, with COVID, we got innovative about how we do things, but you want to be in person and you want to have your bargaining team there. We would have contract elections and say, we as a bargaining team, we would have to staff those voting periods. 1 or 2 of us would have to be there so we could talk directly to the members and they could ask us questions and say, hey, what about this issue? Or like, you got to take your lumps. Like, not everybody's happy with everything, because again, you might have somebody who's 25 who just cares about money, and you got somebody who's got kids who cares about insurance. You got somebody who's a little older. They're like, hey, what about my pension? All kinds of things. So, or education money, whatever it might be. So again, it's a lot of responsibility and a lot of heat on the bargaining team. I think it's great they got expanded to 13. I don't know if those are paid bargaining. We had paid bargaining team members on our contract with Dignity Health. So, again, I really, really hope that these members vote no. I would say vote no, go on strike. You're not going to be done until the 6th. So here's the problem, is that by the 6th, here's what doesn't make sense. By Friday, the hospital already has to have hired the strike nurses. You have to have the contract signed 4 days in advance to these agencies to get the strike breakers. Mm-hmm. And how are you going to set up hotels in 48 hours and food and transportation? It's not going to happen again. I mean, yeah. So something fishy is going on. There's something either, something's not making sense here to me. So either NISNA is saying, what, we know that our members are going to reject this. But again, you don't usually have a TA and put it to the bargaining team. The only time you put something to the membership to vote on where you don't really support it is, say, if management gives you what's called a last, best, and final. And they just say, here's the contract, here's the document. We're leaving the bargaining table. We're not coming back. Last, best, final, take it or leave it. Then you go, okay, we're going to put this to a vote of the members because there's obviously no more negotiations. And you would say, we encourage the members not to vote to reject, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm confused how this is going to work out on a Friday, that they're going to be able to give notice that they're not striking unless they already know the answer.
That's a good point. Or I don't know if this means they're not. Yeah. Because I guess if they declined it, then yeah, because you wouldn't, because I figured, this pushes off the strike, but that's a good point. If they say no, then you still don't have a contract. So then I would assume you were striking again.
Well, yeah, and you're too late to get replacement nurses. Mm-hmm. They have got, I can guarantee you that hospital has to send the check probably by Wednesday, by tomorrow, for replacement nurses, because again, they're competing with all the other replacement nurses coming into play for the other hospitals, right? So that hospital is going to be left out in the cold. So I don't know. It's not making sense to me. I'm curious to see what happens and how many of these members vote. I hope every member sees this. And if you got anybody getting on social media, I'm telling you, Adrian says, vote no.
We need to clip just that.
Send your bargaining team. Send your bargaining team at NISNA back to the table with Presbyterian and do better.
Mm-hmm. And they are, because they are supporting it. NISNA bargaining committee at New York Presbyterian will present the contract agreement to their members with the recommendation that they accept the contract. This is a press release that NISNA gave. The contract will be settled and ratified only with a majority vote by NISNA members at the hospital. So you do have power in order to say no, because yes, they gave you a few things, but they didn't give you the thing that's actually going to change everything. And the rest of the hospitals have not agreed to anything. But they still have until January 9th for some agreement to get made. But really, like Adrienne was saying, less than that, because the hospitals really have to make their move before you get down to this deadline of, are we sending everybody?
Well, did they pull the strike notice? So I see a comment from Angie B, right? But did they pull the strike notice? I don't see anything that says they pulled the strike notice at Presbyterian. Maybe they did, and yes, they would then have to give another 10-day notice. But again, in a case like the union, I work for SEIU. Like, we didn't back down about stuff typically, so we would just give a strike notice every day. We're like, okay, here's a 10-day strike notice for today. Here's one for tomorrow. Here's one for the next day. So we're covered. We're going to send you a strike notice every single day.
I'll look it up and I'll see if they actually did. And then Helro had said, this is not a tripledemic, probably in regards to the title. These are seasonal illness. That's just what the news is calling it, right?
Well, the problem is that it is impacting. It's sending people to the
Mm-hmm.
ER in droves. And again, remember, the mayor has empowered EMS as of a month ago to involuntarily pick people up off the street for psychiatric care and put them in an ER. Made zero provision to staff up the ERs, zero provision of where to put those patients on an inpatient level and who will take care of them. It's not like they just brought in, 100 more psychiatrists into the city, right? There's zero capacity enhancement for this ridiculous, decree that he made in December.
I'm trying to look up and see.
And that's already got everybody enraged in the city and hospitals right now. It's, again, because that is, people go to remember, even no matter how severe we think an illness is, right? But the COVID cases are up. People are going to the ERs. There's not a lot, again, urgent cares are not always accessible. They're not covered under insurance all the time. Sometimes there's a higher copay for an urgent care visit. People have no idea what to go to the ER for, what not to go to the ER for. So people just go to the ER. Right. So now you got EMS bringing in like every homeless person under a psych hold into the ERs. It's a mess. Mm-hmm. It's a mess.
Yeah, it is a mess.
And so I know I'm going on.
They're already they're already. Oh no, it's beyond infuriating. I was just gonna say, that is infuriating. I included it in the title because that's what all of the news articles are putting it at, who are highlighting nurses as these evil villains who are selfish and in the middle of this crisis of that's going on with all these other people hitting the ER. And then we have cold, flu, COVID, all of those other things going on. All of them, like literally all of the media is pointing it as nurses are selfish and evil. How dare you do this right now?
And with that, you just have to follow the money of the media, right? You follow the money of like these organizations that own these hospitals, hedge funds, whoever they are, right? Who owns these media companies? Who's donating to whose campaign, right? But I mean, I just think that, Eric Adams, he better look out because he's going to be in for a really tough fight for reelection. He's not going to be a popular guy unless he comes on the side of the nurses and healthcare workers and the side of the citizens, the residents of the city of New York, of all the boroughs. This is about the people of New York. So I really encourage people of New York City, get behind your healthcare workers, right? This is the fight that matters. You guys all deserve the best care possible. And it's only going to happen if these nurses get appropriate staffing, language in their contract and have that state enforce the law that already exists for ICUs to be 1 to 2.
Because people are not getting adequate staffing right now. And that was pre cold and flu season, right? Before all of this hit. It has been a long time since it was safe to really go in, which is scary, right? Like, that's just a frightening thought that it has not been safe. And if it keeps going this way, this is not sustainable because nurses will keep leaving and schools can't keep up with how many nurses are leaving. Also, do you want all of your nurses to be fresh out of nursing school?
Right. And New York City is not the place people are going to go. If you're entry-level nurse, you're broke already. You're not going to go to New York to go. I mean, it's just, it's not the place to me that a new nurse is going to go. You're going to go to California where there's ratios. Even if you have to commute, it's more manageable. I mean, for me, being from California, the last thing I want to do, I don't even want to get on the train to go to DC. You know, the last thing I want to do is have to get on a train from New Jersey or another borough and, you know, 5 a.m, maybe the train's running, maybe it's not, you know, and nobody, I mean, that's a whole mindset that you've got to be able to get into, you know, to work in the city. So anybody who works in New York City, I applaud them. It wouldn't be for me. It just, unless I literally lived across the street.
Yep. So, it's for real. And this is kind of, I was just looking for, I couldn't find anything that said that they are still planning to strike. So maybe they did rescind it, like when that happened, when they decided to do the thing. So then they would have to announce a strike again. But everyone seems to be saying that the other hospitals are still striking, but they're not. So if anyone does have info on that, please do let me know.
I'll have to take a look on the Federal Mediation and Conciliation FMCS website, because they get notifications for all the strikes. They get CC'd. So FMCS is a federal agency, and the mediators, I guarantee you the FMCS mediators there at the table with them at all these tables. They're more than likely, unless they've been booted out, but that's a free service that the government provides for negotiations. But yeah, I mean, I'm really curious to see how this is going to work out if they didn't pull that strike. And if they didn't pull that strike notice and they vote no, or if it's very close, if you have a very close, you know, I mean, I really hope they have a high turnout for the vote, and I hope it's really affirmatively no. But again, if you have a close strike vote or a close vote on a ratification, that's not good. That's not good, because now you've got a split membership, and the leadership, the union leadership at that hospital is going to be in for a world of hurt. Because there's going to be a group of nurses who are going to say, we want you out. So the next election, you're out. And they're going to be leading a coup. I guarantee you. They're going to say, you guys are worthless. You sold us out. We want new leaders. Right. So, and I don't know. I mean, NNUs they took off a lot. They took on a lot with NISNA affiliating. So hopefully, these New York nurses deliver on their history of being really badass nurses and holding their own and standing their ground.
And know that you do have more power than you think. And say no, because they didn't solve the actual problem. Even when articles like to come out like this that say like, oh, the hospital is the hospital is putting its best foot forward and really doing good faith negotiations. Yeah. Just remember how much money they are making everything. And how much money they are willing to obviously spit out in terms of like covering other nurses, to all the other things. They have the money. They're just choosing to rake it in, and not, because they've seen, especially during like COVID, that you can operate on a shoestring budget. They're just choosing not to see the part where like, oh, more people died and everyone left. They're not looking at that. They're like, oh, look at that bottom line. That looks great. Let's just keep that going. That's not going to work out very long at all, because all the nurses are leaving, because everyone's getting burned out and going away.
Yeah, we got to support them. I saw a comment from Poets Hope. So is there a possible, no, they need to negotiate. That's a duty of the union. As an organization, the union is obligated to negotiate. So there's not any other legal way, right? Because what are the legal ways? What are the legal rights of workers? Not very much. And we already see where these staffing laws are not being enforced. So they have to negotiate in good faith. And again, this is a union that has a long history. They've been around since 1904, 1901. They've had a lot of change in the last 10 years, and they are historically a powerhouse union. I mean, when we were organizing nurses in California with SEIU, we were like, wow, NISNA is really, amazing. Like, everybody has so much respect for NISNA and 1199 New York. So, these are typically unions and have members that do not back down. So this is the absolute not the time to back down after the last 3 years of COVID.
Yep. Because then you're kind of stuck again, remember? So your contract is done.
And record profits. Mm-hmm. Nobody's losing money in hospitals right now. Trust me.
No, not at all. Not even a little bit. Well, there we go. I think that pretty much covers most of the points I wanted to hit. Thank you so much, Adrian, for being here.
You're welcome.
This was like so wildly helpful for
This is
me.
a
And
good
I just
comeback
appreciate your
topic. I'm
brain
very
so much.
passionate about.
Yes, I know. Well, I just super appreciate you because you know so much about it and you're such a good like teacher and explainer of it. So everyone, please do go follow all of her things. They are listed down below. She shares stuff like this all the time. And it's just the best.
Thank you.
And I'll probably stick around. I have a couple questions that we can answer. Adrian, you are more than welcome. We were talking when we were chatting. We were like, when do we want to do this? Okay, 8 p.m. Okay, I think I can make it to 8 p.m. We can do it.
I'm all awake now.
Yeah, so you're more than welcome to stay. I'll probably answer just a couple, or you can go. Totally up to you. Or if you see any that you like,
I'm gonna look at some questions. I'll hang out with you.
Perfect.
And if anybody kicked in.
Yeah, that's what
and then I was thinking we still have to come back and revisit the NHS because now the Royal College of Nursing has a new president.
There we go. Yes. If you haven't seen our video, that Adrian coordinated interviewing a nurse named Siobhan. She's from Scotland, and she gave us all the insider scoop from the NHS situation, their strike over there. So go check that out. And if this is helpful, you do all the YouTubey things that the YouTubies like so that other people here, I'm going to, Adrian, you should just make a clip on your channel of just like Adrian says no, because Adrian has the strike authority. But if this is helpful and you got something from it, if you just give it a like, the YouTube gods really appreciate that. Leaving comments, all of that things it also likes too, but liking is just easier. And there's 400 of you here, which is a lot, like 4 times as many as my normal lives.
Is that 400 people? Welcome. Is that the number?
429. Yeah.
Wow. Holy cow. You guys like this.
Make
sure you guys like it and subscribe if you're not subscribing.
Yeah. So that's where we are. So let me go back and see if we have any questions. Boop, boop, boop. And if you see any too, let me know. Yeah, we should have paid a gaslighting bingo for the hospital executives as always. Right. We didn't have a statement from them. If we get a statement from them, we will play gaslighting bingo with it. Don't you even worry.
I want to say to you guys is that just think about all the crazy laws that have been passed by states in the last 2 or 3 years, right? How fast did those laws go in effect without any prior issue, right? Related to COVID, masking, vaccine mandates, all that. Things that never were even topics prior to COVID. Yet here we've been talking about safe staffing for decades, and none of these state legislators have passed with any expediency or desire anything to protect the patients of their states. This is something that just burns me up. It's like we got to really think about this and really look at who we're electing and what really matters here. What matters is when you go in the hospital and your family goes in the hospital, your child goes in the hospital, you go in the hospital, any kind of situation, or you need healthcare, even in jail or in a psychiatric facility, a skilled nursing facility, that you get the care that you deserve, that technologically we can provide you. But we're not able to because we don't even have the people power. We can't even meet, the capacity of what we can give patients, right? And that us as nurses, it's really important that we're not tasked. We're not checking off boxes. We have to have time to reflect and think about the plan of care for our patients. And a lot of times it really does just mean like, let me just sit and think for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and put this puzzle together of this patient. A patient is a puzzle, and we're trying to figure it out. And we're trying to figure it out for all the doctors and help them and help guide the providers, right? So it's really important. Like, we're not just there, and we need the support staff. We need the CNAs. We need the phlebotomists. We need lab. We need secretaries, right? And so this is, very, very important that we have the entire team present to take care of your needs as a patient.
Yep.
And that includes education. I mean, all of it, proper discharge, making sure you have the right equipment when you go home, whatever it might be. Any good questions?
Very important.
Are other unions in New York supporting the nurses, Teamsters, et cetera? Yeah. So, Amy, Joseph. So I'm guessing, and I haven't seen, I'll have to look at the AFL website and the local unions, But there will be a meeting that will happen. So when a strike notice is given, like say my union, SEIU, we give a strike notice. We would also notify what's called the Central Labor Council, which is like a regional, or in Los Angeles, it was the LA County Fed, Federation of Labor, some Federation of Labor kind of group. And it's not necessarily an affiliate of the AFL, because not every union is part of the AFL. Like SEIU dropped out of the AFL. So, but the Labor Federation will be AFL, non-AFL unions, just any union who wants to be a member. They will say, hey, will you sanction this union? Will you sanction this strike? And will you send out a notice to all of your affiliate members, i.e. all the other unions and locals, and say, will you support this strike? Those unions then have a choice of what they send to their members. So like the Teamsters, very important. I love the Teamsters. The Teamsters have always been so amazing to healthcare workers when we're on the strike line around labor disputes. They will send to their members, hey, there's a strike going on at XYZ facility, hospital on these dates. We want to remind you of what the laws are. You're not required to cross a picket line under the National Labor Relations Act, blah, blah. I don't think anymore they really come out and say, hey, we're not crossing the picket line. I don't know. But they will, there used to be fines involved if other union members cross picket lines. There was all kinds of stuff involved. I don't know the details of that. But in general, there will be support. It is very unusual that another union is not going to support a brother-sister union, especially in healthcare. Especially in healthcare. Because every one of them is, a patient, and they know it.
Yep. And I think I think the part of that is the most frustrating part, is that you don't even know that I feel like they get that it's an issue because they've seen it in their own industry. So they're going to support it, right? In like this one. And a lot of people just have no idea how much of a mess hospitals are right now. Like Jennifer Berry said, I'm afraid to be hospitalized because the people who do work there are like doing their best, but you don't know enough staff. Because if you've experienced it, but most people haven't, right? These are conversations that I have because we've talked a lot about it. I'm just really fun at parties. But as the people slowly like experience like hospital systems, then like they'll come back to me finally after I'm like, can I just destroy your soul about the state of our healthcare system? And they're like, no, thank you. And then they have someone that they love that goes into the healthcare system. Like, Liz, it was horrible. And I was like, remember when I tried to ruin your day and you wouldn't let me? Let's do it now. It happens. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, like this is a really big problem. Lisa was assigned 42 patients in a high acuity psych last night. It was a nightmare. This is a problem. We're just not discussing it. So that's why I'm here, is to make you just as mad as I am, so that I'm not alone in my rage. Okay. Jennifer Franklin said, is there a nursing shortage? Doesn't some of this fall on nursing schools? No, because there's not a nursing shortage. There's enough nurse. So that's a common thing, right? We talked about that a little earlier. There are plenty of nurses in this country. There are not enough nurses who are willing to work in the conditions that are presented to themselves, because it just sucks the soul out of you, right? Because in addition to not being able to do your job, there's a really big toll. Like, one, it's unsafe, but two, in a lot of places, it wears on you. Like, you'll hear like moral injury as a term, because if you feel like you can't do your job well, that's really depressing, right? To go on like every single day and have to deal with that all the time. So nursing schools, they're not keeping up. And you'll see, like, there was a whole thing that like someone was blaming Florida the other day for like, oh, their nursing schools aren't passing enough people. And it's actually nursing school's fault. Nursing school in no way can turn out the number of nurses that are leaving because hospitals are treating nurses poorly, right? Like, I worked as my whole nursing career, from nursing and like 6 years, I was a bedside nurse. I was like, I can't do this forever. Went to primary care as an NP. That immediately burned me out after 3 years of working as a primary care NP. And I'm done. I have no intention of going back. And I feel like I lasted a lot longer than a lot of my friends who graduated together.
Yeah.
That is the problem.
And that's that whole topic of the NCLEX pass rate and the pushback.
Oh, we're going to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about it.
I'm like, yeah, we don't want to dumb down nursing, you guys. We don't want to lower the bar.
No,
we have a huge responsibility. You don't want to dumb down. My state's doing and hiring anybody who's no disrespect to veterans, but it's not. There's to be a teacher, to be a professional, you need qualifications, you need proper training. You're working with sensitive populations. It's not, like just come in off the street and you can be a teacher, you can be a nurse. It doesn't work that way.
Yep.
We don't, we have to keep that bar high. And, there's a lot about nursing schools that.
Yeah. And I understand why, Jennifer, why you said that, because that's the narrative that they've been pushing for decades, is that there's a nursing shortage, but they forget to tell you.
But I will say to Jennifer is that, and anybody about nursing school, so there are ratios. So like for clinical, for example, the problem is you can have 1,000,000 people in a nursing school doing the lecture, right? Like you could do a big lecture hall if you want. We don't. You have these small cohorts kind of in 10s and 12s, I guess. So in California, for example, you have a ratio of nursing school students of 1 to 10. One instructor, 10 students. You cannot go over 10. It's the same thing with CNAs. I taught CNAs. You cannot go over 10. I mean, you could kind of fudge it a little with 11 sometimes, and then you need clinical sites. So this is an issue. Clinical sites are an issue. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, I think if you're a Medicare facility, you should be required to be a clinical site. And clinicals should be able to happen during the daytime, during the evening time. At one point, my hospital did nighttime clinicals. Then they stopped that. They said, well, the students weren't getting enough experience. 12-hour clinicals, whatever it has to be. And again, you've got to then pay enough teachers. You've got to have enough money in the budget. And school budgets, especially public schools, public colleges their budgets just aren't able to expand and contract so quickly from, year to year. Mm-hmm. So there is definitely some issues there. And that's a whole other topic about who should bear the cost of training nursing students. Should we be putting more of that on hospitals? I think, yes, I think we should, especially if they get Medicare money.
Mm-hmm. And then you're asking, it's hard to find clinical placements, right? Because
that's very political too.
You're adding students, and you're adding students too, to this situation that we've been talking about all night. You know what I mean? Like you're like, hey, can you take students? And the nurses are already like, I'm drowning. Like I am drowning, because it's not like the unit gets money from you being a student. Like the school doesn't pay the unit to be like, hey, give everyone one less patient so the nurses have time to teach.
Yeah, you don't get paid to precept.
Yeah. So like it's putting an additional burden on drowning people. So it's difficult to find places that actually will, unless you're one of the ones that actually has to force it to us. So that creates a whole other issue that we have going on there. Mandy wants to know, what do you suggest for non-union hospitals and speaking up for change?
Former union.
Yeah, I was going to say, really like the biggest, if you are all individually going, because when you aren't in a union, one, you don't have the power to change things like nursing ratio. Things you are able to negotiate for yourself in terms of how much maybe you are going to get paid, what your vacation, how much vacation time you might get, but you aren't going to be able to institute bigger changes, right? Unless you go up into management and become the person who actually changes it, which is unlikely. And then you join the dark side. So we don't want that for you. But how are you going to actually enact changes? Because you're never going to get a hospital to be like, you know what, you're right. Like you came into that job interview and you you made a lot of good points that you should have had safe ratios. So like, we're going to do it. I just don't see how that ever changes. Right.
Right. And it's hard, we haven't even talked about, we talk about unions in the context of hospitals, but right, there's home health agencies. Now we've got retirement homes that are getting in the game of healthcare. They're crossing that line as skilled nursing facilities, and also home health, having internal home health agencies. There's a lot of areas that it's going to be very difficult if not impossible to unionize. Right. But I would say as an individual, know your laws, know what your whistleblower laws and protections are, know your legislators, get together with some other nurses and start like a group, right, of nurse advocates, and start talking to your politicians. Set up meeting times with your politicians, interview them, start asking them some tough questions. What do they support, right? Because change right to work laws, that's another component, right? There's a lot that can be done, and it sometimes seems so overwhelming, like, oh, what can I do? I live in Alabama, right? Well, there are things that we can do. We just have to harness the energy and be committed, right? So it's our commitment is going to drive our execution. So be committed about what you want to see, and, put the word out there, but know how to protect yourself as well, because you could end up being a target if you don't have protection.
Mm-hmm. And Mandy, I know my first comment was snarky, in a less snarky way. Now that I've thought about it for a while, and Adrienne has excellent advice. And in addition to that, I would say make noise about it, right? Because I feel like we don't talk about this a lot. And the biggest thing that we can actually, I would think, do is one, discuss, like, just make people aware about it, right? Like, as much as I joke about being the worst person to hang out with at a party, because that's what I want to talk about, like, do have those conversations when they're an appropriate thing to bring up. Let other people know this sucks. Did you know that this is happening? Like, this is happening and it sucks. And this is what mother ratios are. And you know what? This actually could be mitigated if we had safer patient ratios. Maybe that way, when grandma or you go into the hospital, you would have only like you and 3 other patients for your nurse versus 8. You know what I mean? Like, letting them know what the options are and just raising awareness surrounding the fact that this is actually happening. You know what I mean? And talking about it, because for a long time, I feel like nurses, we have not talked about it. And if you can, please do. Like, some hospitals really put a gag on you and don't really let you talk a lot about it, but just talking about it or sharing social media of other people talking about it if you can't talk about it. You know what I mean? There's plenty of people who have left because they're so angry, and we don't work for hospitals anymore, so we can talk about it. And just sharing that, you know what I mean?
And I think, the thing too, that's part of this toxic culture in hospitals, it has done so much damage to people morally, and it's really done a lot of damage to nurse leaders, right? So even if you want to be a good nurse leader, it's like you're swimming upstream because of the forces around you. And that's really a disservice as well to, it's really a disservice to people who want to become nurse leaders, right? There's a lot of people who have it in them to be great leaders, right? And I mean, like, for me, I would never be in management ever, but I chose to be a leader in a union, right? And after today's episode, NNE will never hire me. But it's like, but we need to change that environment so that we can have dynamic leaders and really, walk the talk of innovation and, change theory, and having some, really progressive kind of thinkers and problem solvers in leadership roles like we do in other industries. There's just something bizarrely, like, cripplingly toxic in healthcare leadership that, I mean, it's even though, and there could be toxicity everywhere, right? But there's still innovation that happens in other industries. It just comes to a grinding halt somehow in healthcare, unless it involves like hiring outside consultants and bringing in somebody else's, mechanism or somebody else's model, or let's have some stupid wellness program for Virgin Health or whatever it might be, right? So it just like we need to change, because we also deserve to have support leaders in hospitals appropriately, especially nurse leaders, and really have those advanced degrees count for something.
Jazzy. For sure. Yeah. Jazzy, one of our own, started her job at a, I won't say where, I don't know if you want to say, at a longer term care facility, as the director of nursing, and had a day. So this was an example of a good human going in and being like, I'm going to go fix the thing. And then being met with all sorts of things, like people quitting immediately, hit the ground running. But my assistant, I would assume, person of nursing, quit effective immediately and had to learn to fly by fire. And this is no different. Yeah. So a mess. You're not, and like we always, I always hope to improve the culture. Maybe I'm being bright-eyed and green, but I hope it inspires others. Yes. And we need that. And like we said, it makes it very, very difficult to operate in a system where you do have good people going into it. But it is inherently to make money, right? Is what it all comes down to. Is our system is designed to make money, which is difficult because you're making money off of humans dying. So,
and that's a whole, I'm going to be doing a whole video about hedge funds owning long-term care facilities, and a government agency that didn't realize exists that is helping consumers from predatory billing in long-term care. So stay tuned for that.
Just things to look forward to. Or a
things to
great
look
time
forward
here.
to.
Welcome.
I've been saying hedge funds are not our friends. Once they start buying up healthcare organizations, we're all going to die. We're in trouble.
Everything's great here. Welcome.
Hey, I
You
mean,
glad?
knowledge is power, right? I mean, I'm so grateful, Liz. Thank you for inviting me, bringing me on the show, and everybody else, and really spreading this information, because truly it is empowering. The more that we know, right, and the more we can think and encourage everybody to think critically about complex issues that we feel very emotional about, because everybody has a horror story, right? I mean, you have 400 people in the chat. Everybody has a story. I have stories, right? You had your experience this summer with your friend. People have birth stories, whatever it might be. These are pain points to motivate us to change, to motivate us to impact change. Get involved politically, you guys, especially if whatever your party is, especially if you're Republican, get involved, especially hold politicians accountable. Say, what do you stand for? Who are you getting money from? Look and see who their donors are. Ask them, what are you supporting regarding patient care? Are you supporting staffing ratios? Are you supporting proper whistleblower laws? And if you want model laws, look at California and say, what about this? Why do we not have whistleblower protection for our healthcare workers for safety issues? Why do we not have proper investigations going on?
And this is writing to your state government. Your state is usually who's in charge of your healthcare. And just, you can literally just write to them and say, here is why I think we need these things, right? Because the more people are aware that this is issues that people actually want, you to pay attention to, we have to make a lot of noise, but I mean, we have to start somewhere, so we can start making some noise. But this is how you are going to eventually change things, right? Is by making enough people aware of it. Well, there's two ways. One, it turns into a complete catastrophe and it breaks down so much that the hospital system, the healthcare system legitimately falls apart. And then people will talk about it. People are not going to talk about it right now because at this point, with how everything goes, is everything's lobbied and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of money exchanging hands at the top to not talk, right? It's okay. Everything's fine. Don't even mention it. Hospitals have oodles and oodles of money. Insurance companies have oodles and oodles more of money. And who do you think they want that to change? They don't benefit from the system changing how it is. And they're the ones who are handing over some money to politicians who are then they're like, hey, this is probably how you should vote on this. So all you can really do is write about it and talk about it and get enough people mad, because the option is the healthcare system falls apart, or we raise enough hell about it that we do something before it does that, which would be great, because it's kind of already falling into a
it's going to I mean, it's going to transform, right? Healthcare is going to change no matter what. Delivery of healthcare is changing. We're at a very important point in history. So, but I do feel positive. I do feel look, the power of the people can prevail. We have seen it over and over again, right? So again, start with your church, start with your Moose Lodge, start with any organization you belong to. Say, hey, can we have a conversation about healthcare? And how do you guys feel? Who wants to meet with me, with our state rep, our county board of supervisors, whoever's overseeing the health department for the county, the township, whatever level you want? Just start asking people and meet up. 3 people can affect a lot of change.
Yep. And a lot of people legitimately don't know, just from even having conversations with people within my own life, if they have never been in a situation that's been affected by it, or maybe they have been in a more an insurance situation that they've never had a high deductible plan, they might not even know those exist, right? This is going back to more of the financial things, but if you've never been in the hospital, you don't know what a hot mess it is. If you've never gone without insurance, you have no idea that that's even happening. I very recently had a conversation with someone who was like, did you know that you might have to pay thousands of dollars for your medicine? And I just looked at them do you not follow me on YouTube? This is a person who should follow me on YouTube. And I was like, what? And they were like, I had no idea. That's ridiculous. I'm like, yes, it is ridiculous. And this is someone who we have disagreed on why healthcare reform is needed. But I think a lot of times we assume everyone knows, because I assumed that this person knew that high deductible plans existed and were brutal. Nope. You know what I mean? So like just having those conversations can be highly effective across the board.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. You've had a great chat. You've got a really engaged group of people here. So it's, I think this was a good topic.
Just as mad as us.
Just go be as mad as us and affect change. That's right. And if you need help affecting change, contact me, Nurse Adrian RN at Gmail. You can, if people seriously, if you need help or you need a template for how to start these conversations in an organization, your PTA, your church, your Moose Lodge, whatever it might be, it could be a gun club. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Everybody needs healthcare. It's an issue, right? And sometimes it just starts with, hey, how can we be advocates for ourselves, right? I'm a private patient advocate. That's often what I do is I just go talk to groups about, hey, how can you be an advocate for yourself? And I do that for free. So I can do that through Zoom if you guys want. And then it starts from there. Yeah. Yep. Free is good. Zoom, I'm offering my services at a good price right now.
Very affordable
for groups. Very affordable for groups. So,
well,
taking private
that's awesome.
clients also. So, yeah.
Please, some of them do that.
I believe, really strongly in this, that there is ability to have a grassroots movement of consumers, and that we have got to marry, consumers with healthcare workers. And, I'm part of this group called Pulse. Also, if you guys want to check it out, Pulse online. It's a patient advocacy group. It's out of Long Island, actually. I'm in Virginia. I just joined the board of directors of this organization. So that's really my vision for the organization, bringing it forward, is to really bring consumers together with healthcare workers as patient advocates to talk about patient advocacy. But part of patient advocacy is talking about the legislation, the policy, and how are we improving. We are only going to improve patient care by improving the working conditions for nurses and other healthcare workers, period.
Yep. Exactly what you just said. I just added their website to the description right below all of your socially things, so people can go and check that out. Anything else you want to plug, send people to, anything before we go to bed?
Hey, nothing else. Just be active and, share this replay with every single person on earth.
Yes.
That's all.
All of them. Just all of them. That's not a big ask. I don't understand.
Right. Just share it with everybody. Push it out on all your social media, because this is an important, we did talk about a lot of really important things here. And, there's especially people that need information about unions, about understanding how it works, collective bargaining, why it's important to treat nurses well, all the good stuff. But thank you so much, you guys.
Oh, yeah. And huge, again, thank you to you. Adrian is on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and they're all linked in the description below now. So you can go down there. Do you have a favorite platform?
I really am going to put attention to YouTube. I promise. I keep promising this, but I am. I haven't posted anything on TikTok in a few weeks. So, but yeah, YouTube is going to be I'm migrating over to YouTube, I will say.
Yeah. Yay.
So subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube. You can binge watch my TikToks. Some of them are funny.
They are. They're very funny. She's an excellent human. And she's going to write a book for us one day, and it's going to be the absolute best. We will have a panel thing on Friday. Friday, we're going to do the pick me up stream that we were going to do of to balance out all of the doom and gloom of like why people picked the specialty that they did pick and what they like about it. Just so if you're going into like, if you're just, perusing nursing things, or you're just curious, like why on earth would you ever pick children? Because everyone assumes that if you're a peds nurse, they're like, you love torturing children. I'm like, that's a weird takeaway. That's not what I would think. We're going to just be talking about that as a lighthearted thing. It was supposed to be 2 weeks ago, and then we got a blizzard. You know how things are. But yes, there will be a panel on Friday. If you're new to the channel, we have on Fridays. We have me, and then like people like Adrian and Scott and Chad, Mr. Midwife, all the people, Mama Nurse. Everyone gets to come and hang out. We just get different perspectives because we don't all have the same opinions, and it's great. And then sometimes we fight and it's a good time. So yeah.
We're like a family. We're like siblings.
A little bit too much sometimes. We're like, but it's great. But yeah, make sure if you would like to go subscribe, see those, make sure to subscribe, hit the little bell. Do go check out all of Adrian's things. And yeah, we will. Thanks for being here for our conversation. Share it with everyone you know. It's not a big ask. You'll be fine. And do know that we can do the hard things, friends. We can change all of healthcare. It's going to be fine. We can grassroots it. It's going to be good. You're not alone. If you feel like the world is ending, it's fine. Welcome to the channel. That's what we do here. And you are more than enough. And remember, you can do the hard things. Thanks for being here, friends. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
See ya.
Boop.